And just to underline how we see so much emphasized this positive characterization of Tamar, almost heroic, kind of a sacrifice, that she had this prophecy that she was the one that had to be united with the family of Yehuda in order to bring about the birth of the kings of Israel in future time. And because it was such a crucial aspect, nothing less than the coming of Mashiach depends on it. And so there was enormous resistance also. So with the first son, Er, it didn't work out. He died. He was not worthy. And then same was with Onan. Shelah was not even offered. It seems that only Yehuda himself was worthy of being the progenitor of the Messiah. He himself also didn't want to do it. And so these unconventional means were taken by Tamar, leading to the birth of Peretz. When we say the song L'chadodi, by the way, and we refer to in the ending verses, Ish Partzi, the man comes from Peretz. It's referring to the Messiah, the descendant of King David himself and his descendant, who will come, we hope, very quickly. Peretz means to burst out. And indeed, we know that the coming into being of King David had a lot of strange aspects. One is this story of Yehuda and Tamar. And then that leads to the birth of Peretz, and eventually a very respected elderly man named Boaz, who you may remember from the story of Ruth. And Ruth was a non-Jewish Moabite who was widowed from a Jewish assimilated man, Machlon, who moved from Israel to Moab, married a non-Jewish woman, and died. She became the most famous convert. But what's remarkable is that the Torah actually says we don't accept converts from Moab. Moab was one of the greatest enemies of Israel. It's like a Nazi wanting to become a Jew. But that's not a specific nationality. But the Torah defines the Moabites. The Moab king, Balak, was the one who hired Bilam to curse the Jewish people. But the Beit Din at the time concluded that the prohibition for Moabites to convert and then be able to marry into Israel applied only to the men of Moab and not to the women. But she just kind of squeaked in there. And even any kind of Gioret, convert, the idea that she would be the grandmother of the sovereignty of the king and the Messiah. So see again, the situation leading to the birth of King David being quite unusual. Not to mention Ruth's union with Boaz, where she goes, puts on her finest clothing, and she goes into the granary. But we see in the story of Ruth that although the levirate marriage and the so-called redemption of the family property of Ruth's deceased husband, and at the same time the levirate marriage with Ruth, as it's characterized, it's not clear why she needed that as a convert, but depending if she converted before or after the death of her husband, but it seems from the story she converted afterwards. So the commentaries struggle with this issue, but on some level it's clear that Boaz sees it this way: to redeem the field of Machlon and to redeem the wife of Machlon. And there were two sets of witnesses, for the financial transaction of Boaz redeeming the field of Machlon, and two witnesses to witness the wedding of Ruth and Boaz. And it says that afterwards they blessed Ruth and Boaz, and did so by making reference to Boaz's ancestors. Boaz himself was an ancestor of his parents. And they said, V'hi beischa kabeis Peretz, asher yolda Tamar leYehuda. May your house be like the house of Peretz, this Peretz who Tamar gave birth to, fathered by Yehuda. And so may it be with this young lady, Hana Hazot. So we clearly that Tamar was someone that you blessed other people with. You should be like Tamar, you should be like Peretz. Now, we all know there's a tradition that when we get married, the man gives a ring to the wife. This seems so obvious, it's even been almost canonized in the liturgy because the statement made by the husband is now really part of it's almost like liturgy. He says, Hareini my mind's drawing a blank. I only got married once. He makes the Kedushin, and he says that I betroth you b'taba'as zu, with this ring, kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, according to the law of Moshe and Israel. And so the word tabas, which means ring, is already become part of the nusach, the liturgy, which means we're not meant to look for anything else. But that is not what the law of the Torah is. The law of the Torah is that something of value must be given by the man to the woman upon which the relationship of Kiddushin, of marriage, in a sense, devolves and becomes binding. This whole is a very much more lengthy subject. The Mishnah in Kiddushin says that a man can acquire a woman, this is how it's described, in one of three ways. When you hear expressions like this, please bear in mind that on the Kabbalistic level, a man and woman are really one entity, two halves of a soul that are split into two bodies when they enter the world and then reunited and they get married. And one way is by giving her, it says kesef, money, but it means something of value. Another way is using a document, which is not a document testifying to the wedding, but is a special kind of a document not used anymore, which actually creates the marital bond. And finally, the Mishnah says also through cohabitation, if it's done with the intent to create marriage, also does that. And so theoretically, this is like a common law marriage. There also needs to be eyewitness testimony, but they don't need to witness the act of cohabitation, that they need to see that the couple secluded themselves in their home or their apartment. In other words, they live together. It's assumed that cohabitation took place if they're a normal couple, and it's assumed that they did so, generally speaking, with the idea of being husband and wife. This was certainly true in ancient times, this is much less so now. And the rabbis strongly discouraged establishing the marital bond through the cohabitation that should be established beforehand to give the proper sanctity and reverence to this very, very important relationship. The document was not recommended for other reasons, and the preferred way of establishing betrothal, being married, was through giving something of value. That thing of value did not necessarily need to be a ring. And yet now it is a custom that it is a ring. And part of that is because of Tamar.